conquerors came, empires fell, and revolutions exploded. But the country, Mexico, kept rising from the ashes. Long before Europe discovered this land, the Maya and Aztecs were creating amazing cities. Their cities were as impressive as any in the world. Then the Spanish arrived, and everything changed. This led to wars and betrayals. Mexico also fought for its independence, and there were even more wars. Despite all this, Mexico survived. But how did it do that? What helped this country stand strong through its tough history? And how did it turn into the Mexico we know today? Before the Spanish arrived in Mexico, there were many civilizations. These cultures rose and fell over time, leaving behind the important parts of Mexico's identity. The land was full of cities, temples, and people. These people knew how to build, rule, and defend their territories long before Europeans learned about them. Some of these ancient cultures are still a mystery to us. However, Mexico's history did not begin with the conquistadors. It started thousands of years earlier with people who shaped the land in ways we can still see today. No one really knows where they came from or why they disappeared, but the Olmecs were the first ones to build something big in Mexico. They weren't just another small tribe trying to survive. They had cities, trade networks, and a deep understanding of art and religion. They carved massive stone heads, some over 10 feet tall, and no one is exactly sure why. Were they gods? Rulers? Symbols of power? Whatever the answer, their influence spread across Mesoamerica. Even later civilizations, like the Maya and Aztecs, borrowed from their way of life. And then, without warning, they vanished, leaving behind ruins and questions. Unlike the Olmecs, the Maya didn't just disappear. They had their peak, their fall, and their survivors. At their height, they built enormous cities with pyramids that still stand today. They understood the stars better than most cultures at the time, creating calendars that could predict celestial events centuries ahead. Their writing system, one of the most advanced in the ancient world, allowed them to record everything, from myths to history. But despite their knowledge, their civilization started to crumble. Maybe it was war, maybe it was drought, maybe it was something else entirely. Whatever it was, by the time the Spanish arrived, most of their great cities were already abandoned. Walking through the ruins of Teotihuacan today feels like entering a lost world. You see massive pyramids and long roads. These are the remains of a great city that was not ruled by the Aztecs. Teotihuacan existed long before the Aztecs thought about building an empire. We still don't know who built this city or why it fell apart. At its height, Teotihuacan was one of the most powerful cities in the Americas. Its influence reached far and shaped many future civilizations. The Aztecs called it the City of Gods because it was so impressive and unique. The Toltecs were warriors. They ruled through strength, expanding their influence across Mexico before fading into history. When the Aztecs came to power, they looked up to the Toltecs, claiming to be their successors. To them, the Toltecs were the ideal civilization, fierce, intelligent, and powerful. But for all their achievements, their empire didn't last. Internal conflicts, invasions, and shifting power led to their downfall, making way for the next great empire. Then came the Aztecs. If there was ever a civilization built on ambition, it was them. They weren't supposed to rule. In fact, they started as outcasts, forced to wander until they found a place to settle. That place became Tenochtitlan, the city on the lake that would grow into the heart of an empire. The Aztecs knew how to fight, and they used that skill to dominate their neighbors. But war wasn't just about power, it was about religion. They believed they had to feed their gods with human sacrifices, and that belief made them feared across the region. By the time the Spanish arrived, the Aztecs had built one of the most powerful empires in the Americas. But power always comes with a target on its back, and their time at the top wouldn't last forever. It all began to take another turn when Hernán Cortés stepped onto the shores of Mexico in 1519. A man with nothing to lose and everything to gain. He wasn't just another Spanish explorer. He was ambitious, ruthless, and determined to carve out an empire of his own. With a small band of soldiers, a few cannons, and a stroke of luck, he would bring down the most powerful civilization in Mesoamerica. But this wasn't a simple conquest. It was a war filled with deception, shifting alliances, and an enemy that refused to go down without a fight. From the moment he arrived, Cortés knew he was outnumbered. The Aztecs controlled a vast empire, their capital, Tenochtitlan, a marvel of engineering built on a lake. But power, as Cortés understood, was never absolute. The Aztecs had enemies, many of them. He turned rival tribes against their rulers, promising freedom while secretly plotting domination. Some saw through his lies, but many, desperate to break free from Aztec rule, took the risk. Then came Moctezuma, the Aztec emperor, a man trapped between tradition and the unknown. Stories say he believed Cortés was the god Quetzalcoatl, returned to reclaim his land. But was this really the case? Some historians argue it was a misunderstanding, or worse, a convenient Spanish excuse to justify their conquest. Whatever the truth, Moctezuma allowed the Spaniards into his city. It was a fatal mistake. Once inside, Cortés took the emperor hostage, using him as a puppet to control the empire. But ruling through fear is never sustainable. The Aztecs revolted, driving the Spaniards out in what became known as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows. Cortés and his men barely escaped with their lives, but he wasn't done. He regrouped, gathered more indigenous allies, and returned with a vengeance. The siege of Tenochtitlan in 1521 was brutal. For months, the city endured starvation, disease, and relentless attacks. The Spanish cut off supplies, blocked escape routes, and watched as smallpox tore through the population. The once great city turned into a graveyard. By the time the Spaniards launched their final assault, resistance was all but broken. Tenochtitlan, once the heart of an empire, fell in blood and flames. With its collapse, Aztec rule ended. What remained was a shadow of its former self, its temples destroyed, its gods abandoned, its people enslaved. The Spanish had won, but at a cost even they hadn't anticipated. The Spanish wasted no time imposing the encomienda system. This was a brutal form of forced labor that enslaved indigenous people under the guise of protection. Conquistadors and Spanish elites were granted vast estates, along with the right to demand labor from the native population. In return, they were supposed to provide religious education and basic care. But in reality, it was slavery under a different name. Entire communities were forced to work in mines, fields, and construction projects, fueling Spain's wealth while suffering under harsh conditions. Mexico had a lot of natural resources. These resources helped make Spain very rich. The most valuable resource was silver. The silver boom changed colonial Mexico into a powerful economy. Mines in places like Zacatecas and Guanajuato produced huge amounts of silver. This silver traveled to Europe and Asia. It helped fund Spain's wars and made the monarchy wealthy. Cities like Mexico City became prosperous. However, the workers in the mines faced tough conditions. They dealt with danger, disease, and death every day. But Spanish rule wasn't unchallenged. Resistance and revolts flared up throughout the centuries. Indigenous groups, forced into labor and taxation, rebelled against colonial officials. Some fought openly, while others formed underground networks plotting against their rulers. Secret societies whispered of freedom, their ideas spreading in taverns and churches. Every uprising was crushed, but the seeds of revolution had been planted. The Virgin of Guadalupe was a key symbol of colonial Mexico. She did not come from a battle, she came from faith. In 1531, a native man named Juan Diego reported seeing the Virgin Mary on a hill near Mexico City. The Spanish Catholic Church was unsure about this claim at first. However, the image of the dark-skinned Virgin gained strength. It mixed native beliefs with Christianity. As time passed, she became more than just a religious figure. She turned into a symbol of Mexican identity, resistance, and hope. By the early 1800s, Spain's grip on Mexico was weakening. Political turmoil in Europe, rising resentment among the people, and an economy built on exploitation created the perfect conditions for rebellion. The revolution wouldn't happen overnight, But once the first shot was fired, there was no turning back. It all began with the Cry of Dolores. On September 16, 1810, a priest named Miguel Hidalgo rang the church bell in the town of Dolores, calling for the people to rise against Spanish rule. It was less of a strategic plan and more of an emotional outburst. Hidalgo wasn't a military leader, but his words ignited a movement. His army of farmers, indigenous people, and workers stormed across the land, capturing towns, killing Spanish loyalists, and burning estates. But passion wasn't enough. Hidalgo's forces were undisciplined, and by 1811, he was captured and executed. His rebellion failed, but the idea of independence was out in the open. The war turned into a brutal guerrilla conflict. Rebel leaders like José María Morelos took up the fight, using hit-and-run tactics against Spanish forces. The rebels had no real army, no resources, and no outside support, but they had one advantage: determination. They knew the land, they could disappear into mountains and jungles, and they refused to surrender. Spain tried to crush them, executing anyone suspected of supporting the cause, but the rebels kept coming back. By 1820, after years of bloodshed, Spain was exhausted, and the war shifted in a surprising direction. Then came Agustín de Iturbide, a royalist general who had spent years fighting against the rebels. But now, he saw an opportunity. Spain was collapsing, and independence seemed inevitable. So instead of fighting, he switched sides. He negotiated with rebel leader Vicente Guerrero, and together, they created the Plan of Iguala, a deal that secured Mexico's independence while maintaining the power of elites. Spain had no choice but to accept. But just as quickly as Iturbide became a hero, he became a villain. Declaring himself emperor, he proved to be as oppressive as the Spanish rulers before him. His reign lasted less than a year before he was overthrown, plunging Mexico into a new era of instability. Independence had been won, but the real struggle, building a stable nation, was just beginning. Mexico had barely caught a breath of fresh air from its fight for independence when she began facing big problems. The dream of a stable country quickly fell apart. Leaders came and went like a game of hot potato. Each leader promised to save the country, but they only created more chaos. Agustín de Iturbide, the man who helped secure Mexico's independence, had a grand vision, a monarchy that would unite the fractured country. The problem? No one wanted a king. Iturbide crowned himself emperor in 1822, but within a year, his empire crumbled under the weight of its own contradictions. He was exiled, made the fatal mistake of returning, and was executed. That was Mexico's first taste of political instability, and it wouldn't be the last. Mexico had a vast northern territory, but it was sparsely populated. To fix that, the government invited American settlers into Texas, assuming they'd assimilate. They didn't. Instead, they rebelled. By 1836, after battles like the infamous Alamo, Texas broke away. Santa Anna, Mexico's strongman at the time, was captured and forced to sign a treaty giving Texas its independence. The Mexican government never recognized it, but the damage was done. The North was slipping away. In 1846, things escalated. The US wanted Texas, and then it wanted more. When war broke out, Mexico fought bravely but was outmatched. After 2 years of battle, US troops occupied Mexico City. The war ended with the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, forcing Mexico to hand over nearly half its territory, including present-day California, Arizona, Nevada, Utah, and more. It was one of the most devastating losses in the country's history, and the scars still linger today. Mexico's troubles didn't stop with the Americans. In the 1860s, France, under Napoleon III, saw an opportunity. Using Mexico's debt as an excuse, French forces invaded and installed their own emperor, Maximilian of Austria. He was meant to be a European-style ruler, but Mexicans weren't interested. Benito Juárez, the face of Mexican resistance, led a guerrilla war that eventually reclaimed the country. Maximilian, abandoned by his European allies, was captured and executed. Mexico had fought off an empire, but more trouble was brewing. In 1876, Porfirio Diaz took control. For the first time in decades, Mexico had stability. Railroads were built, cities modernized, and the economy grew. But there was a price: brutal repression. The rich got richer, and the poor became even more desperate. Land was stolen from indigenous communities, and dissent was crushed. Diaz promised order and progress, but after 30 years of rule, the nation was a pressure cooker about to explode. By 1910, people had had enough. Francisco Madero, a wealthy reformist, called for free elections. Diaz, confident in his grip on power, allowed it, then realized his mistake. When Madero gained popularity, Diaz rigged the results. That was the spark Mexico needed. Armed rebellions erupted, forcing Diaz to resign and flee to France. It looked like victory, but the revolution was just getting started. Two names became legends in this fight: Pancho Villa in the north and Emiliano Zapata in the south. Villa, a bandit turned revolutionary, led a fearsome army that took down federal forces with guerrilla tactics. Zapata, the voice of the peasantry, fought for land reforms with his rallying cry, "Land and Liberty." Both wanted justice, but their vision of Mexico clashed with those in power. Victory came at a cost. Madero, the man who started it all, was overthrown and murdered by his own general, Victoriano Huerta, in 1913. Huerta ruled with an iron fist but was quickly ousted. Then came the cycle of betrayals. Villa, Zapata, and Venustiano Carranza turned against each other. Zapata was assassinated in 1919. Villa followed in 1923. Those who fought for change rarely lived to see it. After years of bloodshed, Mexico needed structure. The Constitution of 1917 promised radical reforms: land redistribution, labor rights, and education for all. It was a blueprint for the future, but making it a reality would take decades. The revolution was over, but the struggle for a just Mexico had only begun. This was a country where democracy is an illusion, where elections are held but the winner is always the same. That was Mexico under the Institutional Revolutionary Party, PRI. After the dust settled from the revolution, the PRI emerged in 1929, branding itself as the party of the people, the guardian of the revolution's ideals. But in reality, it was something far more powerful. It was a political machine that controlled every aspect of Mexican life. For 71 years, the PRI ruled with an iron grip. Elections? They were more of a formality. Opposition? Bought off or silenced. Stability? Yes, but at the cost of true democracy. Corruption ran deep, but as long as the economy was growing and people had jobs, few questioned the system. Mexico's economy was a roller coaster. The mid-20th century saw rapid industrial growth, fueled by oil discoveries and state-led development. Mexico was on the rise, with highways, factories, and modern cities. But beneath the surface, trouble brewed. Over-reliance on oil meant that when prices crashed, so did Mexico's economy. The 1982 debt crisis crippled the nation, leading to massive inflation and economic hardship. The government was forced to open up the economy, privatizing industries and cutting social programs. By the 1990s, free trade deals like NAFTA brought hope but also deepened inequality, as foreign corporations benefited more than local businesses. The Tlatelolco massacre changed how people viewed Mexico. It happened just before the 1968 Olympics. Students all over Mexico protested against government oppression. The government reacted harshly. On October 2nd, thousands of people gathered in the Plaza de las Tres Culturas in Mexico City. Suddenly, government forces started shooting. Many people died, but the exact number is still unknown. Some say dozens, others say hundreds, or even more. The government wanted to show that they would not accept any opposition. The massacre left a lasting mark on Mexico. It showed that stability could come with a terrible price. As the century came to a close, a new war started. This war was not against foreign enemies or rebel groups. It was against drug cartels. Mexico's location made it a key route for cocaine traveling from South America to the US. With billions of dollars involved, cartels became more than just criminals. They acted like governments and enforced their own harsh rules. The Mexican government responded in different ways. Sometimes they fought back hard, but other times they ignored the problem. Corruption helped the cartels grow even stronger. They got involved in politics, law enforcement, and daily life. Mexico entered the 21st century as a country still wrestling with its past. The revolution was history, but its effects lingered. The PRI's control was slipping. The economy was modernizing, but inequality remained. And the war against the cartels was reaching new heights of violence. In 2000, something unimaginable happened. The PRI lost. After 71 years, the people voted for change, electing Vicente Fox of the National Action Party, PAN. It was a seismic shift, proof that Mexico could, at last, become a true democracy. But change was slow. Corruption didn't disappear overnight. The PRI even made a comeback in 2012, but its days of absolute control were over. Mexico was finally opening up politically, but democracy brought its own set of challenges. If the PRI controlled Mexico in the 20th century, the cartels were fighting to control it in the 21st. The government declared war on drug lords, but the violence only escalated. Entire towns fell under cartel rule. Journalists who reported on the narcos disappeared or were killed. The conflict was no longer about just drugs, it was about power. But amid the violence, there was resilience. Activists, local leaders, and everyday citizens continued to fight for a better Mexico. The battle wasn't over, but neither was Mexico's spirit. Mexico is changing. It is not just known for its revolutions and drug wars anymore. Its culture is vibrant and exciting. Mexican food, music, and art are popular all over the world. Trade agreements have made Mexico important in global trade. Tourists visit its beautiful beaches, ancient ruins, and lively cities. Mexico is showing everyone that it is a land of opportunities. Mexico has been conquered, betrayed, and bled dry. It has been ruled by emperors, dictators, and cartels. It has lost wars, endured massacres, and fought revolutions. And yet, it still stands. But what does Mexico's history tell us about its future? Kindly share with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more informative contents like this. See you in the next video.